Kids, and welcome to the Stylish Rumble tutorial into Harmony tutorial. Today we're going to take a little break from putting junk together. We're going to talk a little bit about color palette, because color palettes aren't just a designer problem. They're everybody's problem. The palette system in Harmony is a little bit different than a lot of the programs that are kicking around, and they're super diva, okay? They have to be doing everything the way that they want to do it and happy in their own little situation, or else they get a little bit pissed off and they don't work right. Okay, we'll start with the easy stuff. We have a bunch of little swatches. Unlike something like the Photoshop swatches, each of these is like a little bucket full of paint that is connected to an object or scene, and it's a pretty convenient little system actually. So here we've got our little pink A, and we can change the opacity, or we can change the color here, and it's going to change all of the substitutions that have anything to do with this color. This guy here, we can do the same thing, change all the letters along the way. So if you have a bunch of different views of a character, for example, and this is the letters, every time I change the letters, it's going to change all of them at one time without having to go in and recolor everything. All these sliders work kind of how you expect them to work. Your eyedropper tool can be just dragged anywhere and collect any colors it wants. You can drag it off screen and just pick up whatever colors are floating around over there. So that's pretty convenient. Down here, your view, you can hide some or gain some if you're missing them. You can add saved swatches, like something you'd have in Photoshop. It's a color palette. What do you want? Up here, you can unlink these, so you can have your paintbrush is set to one color, your pencil set to another color, and your fill bucket is set to another color. I can't keep track of that. That's too much for me. You can add new colors by pressing the plus button, or you can subtract colors using the subtract button. And up here, you can go to colors and create a new color down here as well. New color. You can also create a texture. In this situation, I'll just use my main color, and we can just convert this to a texture. There's linear and radial, stuff you'd expect. The only thing that's a little different in here is if we copy and paste things like this, and we want to change where the gradient is located, we have to use a tool that we can find up here, edit gradient texture. It's under the contour editor, so the little white arrow, and then we can use this handle to manipulate the texture whatever we want. Now, if we want our texture to go between one object and the next without actually separating them using cutters or anything crazy like that, we can copy and then paste this texture, and it's going to copy this handle's location. So if I change it to something like this, where it's in the middle, I have to copy and then paste that thing just using this gradient editor tool. The next thing we can do is we can add a texture. Let me just throw in some silly little stuff I've drawn. Now I can use this image just as a paintbrush, so I can paint a texture. Here's a happy little donut. You can stretch this out, and this works exactly the same as any other fill, so we're going to be able to stretch this out whatever we want. It's going to just tile our happy food wallpaper. So if you have to paint an entire set or something with granny wallpaper, it's worth your time to import everything as textures and then fill your objects. You're also going to see it a lot more sharply. If you import a bitmap image, it's going to look a little bit pixely and stuff before you render it. This will be really sharp. A slower way to import this is to use your import images, or you can go up to File, Import Images, and it'll give you your image importer. You know, create layer names, and this stuff's all pretty self-explanatory. But down here, we don't want the bitmap. We'd want to convert to a Toonboom vector drawing. And then in our vectorization options, we want a new preset, and we're going to edit that, and in here, color as texture under the output box. So this works. So that's also good if you're doing something like rotoscoping and you want to see your images a little bit clearer. It works better than if you import a bitmap image. Okay, the next step up is the palettes. So I can create a new palette, and each of these palettes is just like, this is called Bill, so it would be associated with the character Bill. And we can create a new palette, and we can call it Parasite. Let's talk about this little palette creator. Up here, it's currently set to scene. That just means that any palettes you create are going to be saved into the scene folder, and they're just going to be associated with the scene. It's going to be connected to any of the items that you save out of this. So if you save this ball into your template library, it's going to take all these scene palettes with it. Element, this is connected to a specific element. So right now it's connected to the drawing, but it's only going to be visible up here if you're selecting on the drawing that it's connected to. So this one I find it's too much work for me. I can't. The job and environment, both of these, if you're working on a standalone, these are just going to save it into your scene folder in a subfolder called environment or job. Like, scene is the best one. All right, it'll just save it in your scene folder in the palette library. That's something we can work with. The next step with palettes is we have our tutorial stuff. That's just the name of this guy. I'm going to rename it Ball. Ball, that's fine. Everything's still connected and working. So link, this means we're going to link to a palette inside of our folder, link to external, that's going to link to an exterior folder. So that's something like, it works similar to reference folders that you'd use in Maya. So you could have, say, a master palette template saved into some magical spot and theoretically link all of your scenes and stuff up to share that one palette. But in reality, it's kind of like a nuclear unicorn. Like, it sounds amazing and it's going to be so pretty, and you meet and it explodes and everybody's just melted because of who changed the palette and where did the palette go? And it's just like, I've never seen that used in a studio because it's so dangerous. Import, you know what import means. Remove, you know what remove means. Rename, we just did that. Duplicate, okay, now we're talking. If we duplicate it, and this works very similar to the way that the drawing element works. A duplicate is an independent copy. So here I'm going to duplicate and it says ball copy. Anything I do to this palette is not going to affect this guy here. It's just creating a duplicate one. Say you really like your first character's colors and you just want to work off that to figure out your next character's colors, then you'd create a duplicate palette and you could use that for something else. Another thing you can do is clone. So just like when we were down here, like copy pasting this guy, the clone works in a similar way. It's called ball clone. And now we can change the colors of this one. So here's our main. We're going to change that, and it's going to change everything along here, but it's not going to change the original palettes. And we can move this up. So the rationale behind this is you may want a night palette or a disco palette or an underwater palette. So you could change each of these now so that it would be best suited for, underwater. And they've even got some kind of cool options. If we go back up here, palettes, tint panel. So we select everybody and here we go. Turn on your preview. We're going to turn the blue way up and the green way. Bird. So now whatever god-awful thing we did to this, you can switch back and forth between these two, and you've got two palettes available. Now in this hierarchy works top down, like most of the things in Harmony. So if we move the ball clone up, it's going to be the boss. If we move the ball up, it's going to be a boss. However, if you select one, it's going to display that in your OpenGL view. If you render it, it's going to select this one that you have selected. But if you don't have anything selected, like once you close the scene, if you have an exterior rendering farm, so you send this, you're looking at this, you're like, oh yep, my clone palette's working. I've got this neon sort of super A here. Send it to the farm. The farm's not selecting anything, so it's going to use this palette because it's higher. So there is a way, if we go to our node library, to force that to use the palette we want no matter what the hierarchy is, and that's the color override. I'm going to open up this window. It's a little bit daunting at first because it's got a lot of stuff in it, but here we can just tell it that, okay, we want our ball clone, and I don't know why this is crossed out. We're going to just tell it that the ball clone, we want that to be the boss, and now no matter what one's on top, or what one we're selecting, it's going to render out the appropriate one. Now, if we're still in our OpenGL view, we can force it to like switch back and forth by pressing on it, but it'll never render out the wrong one because the override is just telling it, like, don't do that. This color override can also serve the same purpose as a clone. We'll just get rid of that. Down here in our colors, we can individually override each color. So we'll just take our main and we'll use this arrow to put it over here. So now it's saying this is going to be doing stuff to that. We're going to put a new RGB. We're going to double click here and we're going to change it to this color. And now it's going to pop out that color wherever that is. We can also use this color override to separate colors. So over here we have the render selected colors only. And we can set this to render selected colors or colors and bitmaps. So selected colors only. We're going to pop the main over there and we can apply that to effects and stuff. Now this is only putting out that color. So here's the whole thing. This is only putting out the color. So sometimes if using your layer selectors to separate things is not really a viable option, you can use this color override in situations to get a similar effect. Another tool that I really like to use is just the color scale. So if this was an underwater scene that I was compositing, I'd turn the value down a little bit. I'd turn the blue up a little bit, just 0.2, and maybe turn the saturation up a little bit. I don't know. If I didn't know what I was doing, I'd talk to a designer and we'd work out a good color scheme. But this will just change everything to the same percentage. So you don't have the same amount of customizable options that you do in a color override or in a cloned palette. Okay, the problem with color palettes is, as you can see, it's important which one's on top. If you're working in a scene, it's important which one you have selected. You can use a color override to force it to do stuff, but often animators don't really know enough about how this works to make sure that things are being pumped out properly. So it might not get caught until it's sent to the render farm, and then you'll get a revision from your director saying like, all your colors are wrong, or it's using the wrong palette or something, and you or somebody else has to go in and change all those scenes, and then it has to get rendered again. So it could be a lengthy process for like a simple little mistake like this. Another problem with palettes like this, it's important to know that if you create a new version of this file, right now I've got two versions. I've just got tutorial stuff and then tutorial 2, so version 2. If I have 15 versions, all of these versions are sharing these same palettes and these same elements. So if I take this C and I give it a tumor head and then I just change the clone color to something else, that's going to change all of them in the entire scene folder. So all the different versions. I've seen baby designers who they'll create, okay, character 1. So they'll open a scene and they'll just have it like characters, and they'll create character 1 and they'll use a palette. So that they made their ball, they use palette 1. Then they save that out into the template library. Then they make character 2 and they'll use the same palette. They'll just rename it. So I'll rename this ball to Cube. So then I have to draw Mr. Cube, and I save Mr. Cube out. And this particular designer did about 10 characters maybe. And we didn't find out until we were putting all the characters in one scene that they all had one palette and that they just changed the color in them. So it would just choose whichever one was at the top, and that's the one it would render. So just because it would be named like Cube Ball, but they're both the same palette, they have the same palette ID. So that's an important thing to keep track of if you are working on the initial designs of things, right? So in the scene, I can actually copy the color ID here of a single color well, and I can paste that into a scene. So now I can check, are these identical colors? And no, this one's F2 and this one's EC. So those two are not going to influence one another. If you want to see the actual palette itself, you have to go in your palette library, and then you can open up these palette lists inside of a text document. So here it's got the opacity and color, like the names of them, and here's the color ID over here. So you could open up two different palettes. So you've got Mr. Cube and Mr. Ball, and you can compare the palette IDs to see if the designer has actually created multiple versions of the same palette and used it on different characters. It's happened. Another thing that could happen is an animator will customize a rig. So Mr. Ball will go out, and a seasoned animator who knows a little bit more about the network, they'll make a customized rig for themselves that they can work a lot faster with. And most studios, there's no problems with that at all. But the only thing is, if they decide 3 episodes in to change the color palette of the main character, and they're not communicating that well with the animation team, or he just wasn't paying attention in the meeting where they clearly told him that the palettes were changing, and he doesn't update his template, when he imports his character into the scene, it will have both his template and the new template, and they will just chew each other up. Like, it'll just randomly select colors from both the palettes and just do whatever it wants. It's a gong show. Then somebody has to go in and make sure that they get rid of the parasite. So here, sometime long ago, a parasite was created, and it's just lingering. It's lingering in your scene. So I'm going to delete the parasite, and you might feel better about that. You'll be like, oh, the parasite's gone, all right. But if you go into your scene folder, palette library, there he is. He's definitely gone, but he's never gone. So you have to go into your folder and actually delete the parasite out of the palette library folder, okay? But if you saved a template out, if you saved this ball in your template library, it followed it. It's connected to that now, and it's there forever. And if you have the tiniest grain, let me just back up. We got parasite. Parasite's back. I deleted it out. That's why it's looking a little bit weird. But now we can add something back to parasite. A little thing like this. And say I decide I don't like it and I erase it, but I don't quite get it all. And it's this little piece, and it could be the smallest little piece. So I erase and I miss that. And I'm zoomed in 80,000% right now. So if I zoom out, there's no, like, I can't look at it's so tiny. So now, because someone didn't delete their rough using like an entire scene burning process, Parasite is now with us forever. It's just, he belongs to you now. He's your friend. He's going to follow your rank. Like, hey guys. And if you delete this, boop, and you save it and close that whole scene, we're going to delete Parasite out of here because we're like, no Parasite, get out of my scene. And we open it up. What's that? Nah. No color. Color's not a problem. So while it doesn't know that Parasite is the problem, it does know it has a problem. You can see it's already got a no color. Now it's got another one because Parasite is there forever. That's one little issue with this this system, is now this little dot, which if I have 70 hands, or this is like, if this is a massive file, I'm never going to be able to find that little grain of dust just sitting there being a monster. So if you're new to Harmony and you've never worked in a studio before, it's very common for this palette library to have 60 palettes in it. And it could just be a white background with like a rubber ducky, and it'll have 25 palettes because there's parasites, little parasite palettes. Another problem is if this has been renamed to like night palette, so we call this like night ball. There's no way to tell that this is a clone palette or that's connected to anything else. We just see night ball and we're like, okay, the palette's called night ball, but it should have some sort of a star if it has something associated with it that's kicking around, or especially if it's in the same scene. So here we have Cube and Nightball, and they're clones, but there's nothing saying that they're linked or that they belong to the same item, or there's just, you don't know. And some little parasites just come along, and here it is. Or some animator saved something they use all the time, and they haven't cleaned up their palette library, and now you've got render problems because Nightball decided to be at the top of the hierarchy instead of Cube. Okay, so that's some of the problems that you could come across if you're using this program. The next thing, as a rigger, you're going to be putting on the hand charts, and oftentimes the hands are just generic. So you'll have generic male, generic female, dog, whatever your show happens to be all about. So in this case, I've just made a bunch of letters and balls because that's way faster. These are all currently colored with Cube, and this would be generic male or generic female, and we'd have to recolor it using its new palette. So in this case, this ball's name is Bill, and we have to recolor it using the Bill palette. Now, you might be thinking, hey, but we can just change the color of this, and now it's gonna be the right color. But we cannot, because every character that's using those generic hands is using that palette, okay? Sneaky little palette. One option would be to put in color overrides for all of these things, but they could get deleted. They could make your scene laggier or whatever. So the standard practice is to actually just recolor all the hands using the appropriate palette. First of all, you want to have all your hands exposed, and I have actually found the way to do that. You want to select as many frames as you have hands, and then you want to go to Exposure, Sequence Fill, Control M, starting value 1. That's how many it's going up. And then hold, I only want to hold one frame each, apply, and it's going to pop all my guys on there. Now the problem with this is if you have not renamed all of these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, they're named front, side, back, Penelope, whatever it happens to be, that's not going to work. The second easiest way is to use your greater than, less than brackets to go back and forth, and then use your square brackets to go back and forth here. So you want to put one hand on each one, you select your first frame, go to your first drawing, and then go overchange, and go through as many as you have. It's faster than using your mouse or whatever, just using those hotkeys, but it's just You gotta have them all exposed. There's 3 ways that I know of that you can go about recoloring all of these. The first one is to go through the tedious system of actually selecting each piece and then changing the color, making sure it's all right, or using your paint bucket tool and then going through and then repainting it. But the problem with paint bucket tool is under here, that's still this color. Okay, so that can definitely cause problems. Not only is it slow, you also have to make sure to select the entire bulk color if something's like not flattened like this, and then select your color like that. The next way is to group each of these in the drawing, so just Control G. Taking all of these, cut, paste, and using select by current color, Control Shift A, that's going to select all of the purple. Then you go to Bill and you pick the fill. Next, you're going to go to the letters, Control Shift A, go to Bill, and I want my letters to be brown. And then you select the outline, Control Shift A, and then you go and you do your outline. So now all of your things have been recolored, and you just have to copy and paste them back all onto their own layer. And the next way is to select 2 of these. So I'm going to take the main and I'm going to protect color, the letters, right click, protect color. And now I'm going to recolor my outline because protecting these means that they're locked, like you can't change them. Stupid nightball. So I need to change my outline. I go down on my build, choose the one I want my outline. I'm going to use my repaint bucket, and please take the time to just read the names on these buckets. Paint unpainted means things that haven't been painted yet. Repaint means it's going to paint something again. Unpaint, like they're named very sensibly, but a lot of people don't know. They're same with the brushes. Like please take the time to go to your tool properties and look at these. Like you can paint behind, so I can draw behind this. It's on the line art, like they're both on the same layer. I'm just drawing behind it. It has paint only like what's been painted already. And see, because I have the protected color on, it's only painting the thing that's not protected. So you can protect the main color and then make it like a stripy outline without meticulously painting the outline. Just go read that. Okay, so sorry for that tangent. It just bothers me. People don't read the tooltips. So I'm going to use the repaint brush. In my tool properties, I have this button that says apply to multiple drawings going left to right. This will go down through the layers. So if you have overlay, line, color, underlay, this will paint through those layers. This one's going to paint across your timeline. Then you select as many frames as you want involved, and you make a big old loop so that you get all of the outlines. Then you have to go back to your color. So you protect the one that you've just done, protect it. You go back to the cube. Now you unprotect the next one. So you just protect color again, and I've added a hotkey here. There isn't one already, but you can add one. So you go to your preferences, your shortcuts, color management, and it's one of only 4, so it's pretty easy to find. Protect color value. I've just Control N, but whatever you want to add there. So now my main is unprotected. My outline we've already gotten rid of. So we go down to our ball, select this. You have to select this again, and you have to reselect even if you've already unselected, because sometimes it doesn't want to work. And you can just big old loop, blip, protect the new color, and then unprotect the old color. And then you take this one, tool properties, select across. I think this protected color is the best solution, especially if you have huge groups of hands. If you have 70 hands, then copying and pasting them all into one layer, having to sort them all out back into the layers is just going to be just too much work. Like, no, I don't want to do that. Ideally, in the world of magic and make-believe, we would be able to take the hand color and use an option to create a new color ID while still connecting it to the prop. So we'd be able to pull in the hand chart. Hey, Harmony, we'd be able to pull in the hand chart and then select on the palette and then right click and create new color ID that's still connected to that drawing. So that way we wouldn't have to recolor all our hand template. Every single time we rig a character, we have to recolor the entire hand palette, and it's one of those things that I'm sure there's some smart person out there that can find a better way. I actually spoke to some of the designers that I work with and asked them what some of their biggest pet peeves were. So this color linking, how you have to recolor everything, this clone palette rendering out wrong, or just having palettes float around and just escape on everybody. But the absolute favorite comment I got from the designers were just from my buddy Bob, who said, "Colors are dead to me." That's all I said. So thanks, Bob. Okay, so I think I've covered everything I wanted to cover, and most of the problems that you're going to come across. Often in smaller studios or smaller productions, the rigger will kind of double as a technical director. So you might be asked to help with fixing some of these color render issues. And when it comes down to it, if you're having trouble, color override is the best way to force something to do what you want it to do. But the number one way is to make sure that the one you want is on top. So Nightball's on top. If you are working as a designer, it might be worth your time to make sure this says clone if you're using a clone. Always make a new palette if you're making a new character. Don't reuse palettes. Even duplicate palettes are risky, like, because you might be like, oh, I'm going to duplicate this and accidentally hit clone, and then two of your characters are sharing a palette, and you don't find out until you start animating, and then you have to frantically recolor something, which you've seen is not the most friendly thing. There are certainly advantages to the color palette system in Harmony, like just being able to change, all of these hands now instead of being this color, we can change them to that color because now it's an alien. But if we need to use this on another character, then we're going to have to recolor it or use color override. So pros and cons. Overall, the color system is just a diva, and you have to kind of know how she works. No, she likes only red M&Ms and room temperature sparkling water in some sort of a crystal vase, because if you do anything slightly to upset her, she's going to peace out and break her whole show. Colors are dead to me. On that pleasant note, thank you for dropping by. Like, share, subscribe, all those things internet people ask you to do. And if you have any questions or comments, or you have a great story about how some designer colored 10 characters with the same palette and it caused you like a week's worth of work to recolor the entire show, please share that with me. That would make my day. Okay, so I'll see you in the next video.